All right, GIS can help everyone. Raise your hand if you think that's true. All right, I'm in the right place. Nice. All right, GIS software is made for everyone. So it doesn't matter, if you're in electric, gas, water, military, banking, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets the same base software. At its core, GIS software solves problems for points, lines, and polygons. And the software doesn't care what those points, lines, and polygons represent. Now, GIS is an amazing tool, but it's not a one-size-fits-all, solution right out of the box. The true power of GIS comes with how an organization configures that software for their workflows, their data, and their users. And this is especially true with ArcGIS Online and Enterprise. So when I talk about GIS, I like to break it down into three parts. You have data, you have software, and then you have infrastructure. And infrastructure, obviously, is your servers, all that hardware that's kind of behind the scenes. And I'm not an IT person, and typically IT owns that. So I'm not really going to talk about that. We're going to focus on the data and platform piece of it. So I also like to use an analogy when I talk about this flow kind of through. And it's kind of a food and restaurant I like to eat. So this is the analogy I like to use. So with Enterprise, the two big pieces that I consider that were kind of game changers were the Enterprise Geodatabase, which kind of changed the game on how we centralize data and how we organize it. And then also the portal, which kind of changed the game on how we share data. So before you had to pass around, maybe you're passing around MXDs, you were shipping out a shapefile or a file geodatabase. And I'm sure there's a lot of issues with that. So the way data works, the way I see it anyway, it's always owned by the BU, and it always starts with an input. So you have this BU workflow, which I kind of consider kind of like a farmer, planting seeds and growing crops, right? At the end of that growing season, they have a crop that they need to harvest. Just like the BU workflows create some sort of file, some sort of information. It could be a CAD file, it could be tabular, it could be imagery. It could be all types of things. The point being is you want to get that information, you want to get that data, just like a farmer wants to get their crops, into a usable format. And we do that using the ETL, so extract, transform, and load. And that's kind of that harvesting of that data to get it into that Enterprise Geodatabase. Now and you can see I have unrefined ingredients there for the Enterprise Geodatabase. And the reason I say that is when it's in that Enterprise Geodatabase, it stores it very well. But when you connect into it, there's no symbology. If you have like an SD connection into that geodatabase, you can connect in and you can see everything. There's really no way to, you can create views and things like that, but there's really no way to kind of filter down for what you want the user to see. So when Portal came out, again, that kind of changed it. So now we could take that Connect from Pro, publish that, as a layer on Portal, and during that publishing, we were kind of refining that data. We were saying, okay, here's what I want you to see. Here's the way I want it to look. This is the information, the fields that I want you to be able to see for my users later on in the process. Now, once it's a layer on there, then you take a map. And a map for me that's the recipe, right? That's the preparation of the meal. So you're taking all those different ingredients, you're putting them together the way you want, and then you're creating an app. And the app that's the actual meal. That's the presentation of your basically all your different ingredients. How you want people to see it, how you want people to use it, and things like that. That's what the customer consumes. So Portal I consider as a restaurant, and I consider the chefs are the ones that are making those meals, right? So why am I talking about all this? Well, if infrastructure is owned by IT and the business units own data, who owns your restaurant? Who are your chefs? And I've seen it typically it's two ways. Either IT owns it. So when I worked for AEP, IT owned our distribution portal, and you ended up with basically one app. It was the GIS app, and everybody went to the GIS app, and there's no options. The restaurant, I kind of consider that is kind of like kind of like raising canes, right? We got chicken fingers, you know, but that's all we got. You can have all the chicken fingers you want, but there's no real options. On the other side of it, you could have the BU on it. And the problem with that is typically you have multiple BUs, you have multiple people that have an interest in what they want it to look like, the standards, those type things, and you get a lot of bickering between them on what it should be. And what ends up happening is your restaurant starts to be like a buffet, almost like a Golden Corral, right? You got lots of everything. The quality is not fantastic typically. Sometimes you have a few good things in there. Your macaroni and cheese is labeled baked beans. There's a slight chance of maybe getting food poisoning. So it's kind of a mess. So I worked in Portal at AP for 10 years. I was kind of, you know, I wouldn't say over Portal, but worked quite a bit with it. And in that 10 years, I started thinking, you know, there's got to be a better way that we can do this. And in 2018, I got the opportunity to do that. So AP let me hire a team, and that's kind of where, to basically prove my point that Portal should be owned not by the BU and not by IT. And that's where GIS came into play. So there's 6 unique pieces in chess. I love chess, so that's kind of where this came from, or why I think of it that way, because of the strategy of it. I consider myself a rook, so I had this vision, this strategy in place that I wanted to do. I kind of had the big picture of what I wanted our portal to look like and how I wanted it to be leveraged and used. So I started thinking about, okay, what kind of team do I want to form? So I started looking at, you know, what are my weaknesses? What are the things that I've struggled with, you know, through my time getting a solution to production? And the first one was, it was a glowing need for me, was the ETL process. So I was really good about, you know, give me some sample data from some, you know, database or something within the business unit, and I could take that and basically build a proof of concept for people to use and get it in their hands. The problem was the automation of that, getting it to happen, you know, every day, twice a day, every hour, whatever it needed to be. So I knew I needed someone that could do kind of that. So that's where the knight came in place, and I call them the magician because, well, they can do stuff that I can't. So they're really good about doing all that type of stuff and that ETL process. The next thing I struggled with was I would create all these apps and get them out there and had a real good relationship with the business units. But because there were so many opportunities, because AP was so large, you would work with someone, you'd come up with a proof of concept, and then you're kind of off onto the next thing. And you couldn't really keep that relationship, you know, together and kind of help them build on it. So I knew I needed a communicator. So that was my bishop. So the bishops sit on the left and right of the king and queen, and they're kind of in their ears, right? So the bishop and the knight are night and day, right? So they're opposite ends. So one leans more towards infrastructure, one leans more towards data, data connections versus user connections, and I'm not going to read all of them, you can kind of see there, but the main things being they do different things, and the rook kind of sits in the middle and kind of organizes, you know, what needs done. So the main piece is the king. The king is the customer is the king. If you don't have a king, you got no game, right? There's nothing you can really do. So the point of this team was to protect the king, to help the king out, because as you can see, the king can't move very far. They don't know the board very well and how to maneuver in the GIS environment, and that's what we're helping with. The queen is IT, and IT is overkill. IT can go do all kinds of things. We all know that, but not everything needs to be solved with code. Not everything, you know, needs to take. I think you mentioned it doesn't need to be 2 years to do a project. You know, especially they've already installed Portal, so we don't need you in there doing every single solution. The final piece are the pawns, and that's your resources. That's your people, your software, your data, your connections, and your workflows. Anything that's at your fingertips that you can use to help to get a solution in place. Now, the pieces are important, and getting the right people in the place is important. Equally important is the placement of these pieces. So the king is the business units. So you're always helping the business units. That's always where your king is. You can see in the I believe the central team should be where the rook, the knight, and the bishop stays. And you can see I have 2 bishops there. I mentioned there's 6 unique pieces, 7 depending on how you look at it. Because the bishop is assigned to one color, it's the only piece that's assigned to one color. That's why I consider it kind of the 7th piece. So we had the king side bishop worked more with the business units, and then on the central team we had a project manager, and that was the queen side. So the queen side would work with IT. Now, I believe that this team works best on the central team, and the reason I know that is because I ran this team for 6 years, 2 years in each of these. So I did it in the business unit, central team, and IT. In 2018, I was within transmission line engineering when I was able to hire this team. The problem with running that team out of the business units is because we're in transmission line engineering and they had their own initiatives and their own goals, it kind of interfered with some of our initiatives and goals of the team and what we were basically meant to do. And after a while, it kind of got us off of the path that I wanted us to be on. In 2020, there was a major reorg, and AP formed a bunch of central teams. So in between the IT and the business units were all these central teams. There was a CAD team, there was a database team, and they formed a GIS team. And they took my team and basically made it that team. And we crushed it in the central team, and this is how we did it. So this was my plan for that team within Central. And the way this worked was we would provide the outreach and the training. We would provide those portal standards so everything kind of looks similar. Things were labeled properly, just a standard of how you wanted things to look. We would also provide that platform and support and the platform vision. So where do we want to take this platform? What do we want to do with Portal and grow it throughout the company? We would also work with the business units as much as we could. So we'd identify SMEs, subject matter experts, and we would basically work with them on a weekly, monthly basis, whatever they would kind of let us do. As the Rook, I would get into staff meetings, any type of meeting that I could get in with the business unit to make that contact. So these ideas and projects that we would get would flow down to the central team, and it would create this filter. So instead of going straight to IT, we'd kind of filter out those configuration type projects. And one of the things I negotiated was, give the team 20 hours without any oversight or micromanagement or things like that. Just let us work with the teams. And as ideas came up, let us create a proof of concept. Let us vet those ideas and kind of capture what they needed. So that way, if it did need to be a larger project to go to IT, we already had the framework of what needed to be done. So you didn't have to take all that extra time, all those extra meetings to do that. So that created that funnel to IT. On the right there, you can kind of see the grayed out stuff. That was basically, hey, we can expand this even further if we start using Arcade, if we start using Python, if we start taking advantage of the other extensions that have already been installed. Kind of let us be over that and help the business units out to use them. Because what happened was IT would install these, just like Portal, right? They would install the software, they would toss it back to the BUs, and then kind of walk away and go on to another project. And the BUs had no clue how to use those extensions or even Portal. So the next 2 years, or in 2022, there was another major reorg. They eliminated, it was basically a executive leadership reorg. So the president of AP, all that, they redid it, plugged new people in. They kind of looked at the organization, saw these central teams and said, oh, we don't need those. And they just stripped them out, and either they fired pretty much all the directors over those groups and moved the teams to their corresponding group within IT. So our GIS team was moved to the IT GIS team, and I was miserable for 10 years, or for 2 years, sorry. And the reason I was miserable was because it was so much. There were so many meetings and talking about stuff, and not actually doing stuff. And it drove me crazy. So I said we crushed it in the central team. The reason I know that is I created a dashboard to track all our projects. So within this dashboard, because we were creating so many different things, I needed a way to track not only where the projects were at any given point, as far as, are they on dev, test, QA, or prod, but what was the return on investment? What was the reason for that project? Who was the contact for that project? We would even do diagrams as far as, where the data was coming from and what enterprise geodatabase was it coming out of, and the pro project and the layers and the maps and the apps. All that was tracked in this. So in 1 year, we did 45 projects, and it was kind of split up pretty evenly, right? So 27% were IT funded, 27% were regulatory, 27% were non-regulatory, and then 19% were just new functionality and because it was cool. So Ezra users, in July is the UC. That was like Christmas for us, right? So they put out all the new stuff. We start playing with it. We look back on solutions that we'd already created and tried to look at, okay, we couldn't do this last year, but now it's out there. Now we can do it. And because it was configuration, it was real easy to plug in. It only took us a couple hours to upgrade a lot of these things. But the big number is 87% of those projects had no IT involvement. Other than maybe a couple meetings with them and things like that, but no development involvement. We were able to do it all through configuration. And to me, that was huge. So when we went to IT, so if I flip back here real quick, all that stuff at the top, all the green arrows going up and a lot of the orange arrows going down, when they got rid of the central team, they basically clipped all those. So when I got to IT, they said you can no longer have meetings with the BU because we don't have a project number for it. So there's nothing to charge to. So you can't meet with them. And that killed a lot of our relationships with the business units and kind of slowed down a lot of initiatives. To give you an example of some of those initiatives that basically got cut, or some examples of them, I got 3 examples here of all 3 of these things took less than 20 hours. The first was the parcel viewer extractor. Very simple. It was a collaboration between right-of-way siting, outreach, and engineering. They all needed parcels for the design and engineering portion of a project. And IT had already purchased a nationwide parcel layer. The problem was they had it as an image. So unless you were just trying to look at it, you couldn't do a lot with it. So all we did was basically turn on the feature services for it, created an app around it, and created a nice simple thing for them to go in and extract that data. We found from the return on investment that saved them 4,000 hours on average per year, and we times that by $50 an hour, so we figured about $200,000 in soft savings. The next one was the oil containment dashboard, and this was for station engineering. We had over 3,500 stations across 11 states, so there was a lot to keep track of. The station system of record wasn't in GIS. It's in a separate product called IPS, which is a tabular database. So we were able to connect into there, pull out the maintenance information, which included their oil containment inspections. And by doing that, we were able to pull that in, put it into the GIS, also connect to SharePoint, connect to some shared drives where some of the imagery was, as well as a couple other systems. Put it all in one dashboard. And because station engineering is so big and there's so many users, we found that saved 20,000 hours, or about $1 million a year. And it was so successful that myself and the SME presented at a CGRI conference and wrote a paper on it for CGRI. The third one is the interconnect dashboard. This was for interconnection services and planning. And this one didn't have so much on the time savings, but what did happen with this product was the director, 1 week after we put it in production, the director of interconnection services, she went in there and was researching one of the proposed interconnect that we were planning on building a station for, and found that it was actually outside of the RTO. So we were able to pass that cost off to the customer, and it actually saved AP $8 to $10 million of that station cost, which made her very, very happy. So all these soft savings are great. The business units love that because, but for me and my team, The main savings were, the first one was the standards and automation of being able for right-of-way to extract a standard right-of-way schema at the beginning of those projects. We were able to start automating that right-of-way process. For the oil containment, now we had a connection into the maintenance of stations. So we had all those maintenance records. So we already had line maintenance that's in GIS. Now we were able to show station and line maintenance in the same place. And then for the interconnect dashboard, that SME that we worked with got big pats on the back from the director and the managing director of their team, which was huge because that opened the door to get us in earlier on in the planning, and we were able to start creating more solutions for those earlier stages of planning. Now, comparison between Central and IT. 2 projects, these were the closest ones that I had data on. I'll be the first to say that this isn't apples to apples, but it's not apples to carrots, right? It's kind of apples to oranges. It's 2 round fruits. And the reason I say that is the quick little diagrams that I had done on the bottom, the boxes and the colors were meant to show who's doing what. So it kind of signed work. Well, the reds and the blues for both of those were done by the exact same people. And if you extract just the technical time for creating the solutions and remove all the meeting hours, they were within 100 hours of each other. So what does that result in? When we were in the Central team, we did that project in less than a year for right around $38,000. When I was in IT, they were still working on that project when I left in June. So we were 2 years into it, and we were over $300,000 on it. That's insane, and it happens all over the place, and it blows my mind that companies let this happen because it's such a waste of money. Again, portal's been installed by IT. They don't need to be involved in every project. Let people configure it and use it the way it's supposed to be used. You don't see IT typically in your engineering departments, working on every CAD drawing they do and things like that. So why are they doing it with IT? Or why are they doing it with GIS? So if you do get the chance to create a central team, or even if you don't, even if you just have your own GIS team, the keys to success for us were stay focused, let the BU handle the data and the data governance, let the central team handle the platform and the configuration, and let IT handle that infrastructure and any kind of customization that you need that's not out of the box. Evangelize. So when I say that, go to staff meetings, get into the business units and listen to what they're doing. Lead the conversations about GIS. Don't let an engineer lead that conversation, which you see a lot as well. And get involved. Anytime you can, if you can help, get involved and do it. Subject matter experts were the key for us. The better relationship we had with our subject matter experts, and the more that they were involved, the higher the success rate of our solutions. So identify your SMEs, educate your SMEs, and bond with your SMEs. Meet with them weekly, monthly, whatever they'll let you meet with them. And keep it simple. Points, lines, and polygons, that's really what we're working with a lot of the times. Out of the box, configuration first, and provide continuous value. Start small and build. You don't have to have the entire perfected 100% solution handed over to them. You can give them 80% and continue to refine it.